Hi everyone, this is Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and I am here for another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted. And today I have Dr. Jack Singer, and I am going to read his bio before I say hello, so you know exactly who he is and what he has done. Dr. Jack Singer is a practicing industrial, organizational, and clinical sports psychologist and a professional speaker who for the past 33 years has spoken for and consulted with sports, legal, medical, and financial organizations and associations from Miami to Malaysia. Jack has been a practicing industrial, clinical, and sports psychologist for more than 40 years, and now he teaches the same blueprint for developing the mindset of a champion that he has taught to 3 Olympic gold medal winners and hundreds of professional and world-class athletes. To professional athletes, to professionals in all walks of life. A frequent guest on MSNBC, CNN, Fox Sports Net, ESPN, and countless radio talk shows, Jack's unique stress mastery techniques in the busy medical workplace have even been featured in USA Today. Jack is also the author of 4 books, including Dynamic Health, along with Dr. Bernie Siegel, and he has published more than 197 professional articles in financial, sports, medical, healthcare, psychology, and business periodicals. Jack has served on the faculty of 6 universities during his career, including his role as an assistant professor of psychology at the U.S. Air Force Academy. That's a mouthful. Hi, Dr. Jack. How are you?
Michelle, it's wonderful. Thank you very much for reading the bio that I wrote for you. It's always fun to write about myself. You know, you have to admit it, you know, you like to hear about yourself. So that's a good way to start. Thank you.
Well, yeah, welcome. And I just want to, dive in, and you have quite an impressive list of accomplishments. What has been your very favorite thing to do if you could pick out one?
Well, probably the most favorite thing that I've ever done in my career has not been in the field of psychology. It was a small acting part I got on Here's Lucy once with Lucille Ball. That was probably the favorite thing I did. And Lucille Ball steered me straight because at that time, Michelle, I wanted to become a comedic actor or a stand-up comic. And I'd already been accepted to a doctoral program in college, and she told me I'd be crazy to go to Hollywood when I have this strong educational background behind me. So she convinced me to delay my desire to have a captive audience in front of me. And I later discovered what professional speaking was. And becoming a professional speaker, now I had the credentials, my education behind me, and I could still have a captive audience. So whenever I speak for audiences, whether it's in a company or whether it's an association meeting or what have you, I try to make it fun and humorous and rivet the attention of everybody. So I'm really accomplishing everything that I wanted to do all along.
Yeah, you really are. So it's nice to be able to combine, your passions to create a whole picture. So right. Yeah. So I want to ask you, in coaching, in psychology, sports psychology, what do you see as the #1 issue that athletes struggle with?
The #1 issue that athletes and everyone else struggles with is controlling their internal critic. And by that, I mean the little voice inside your head that's constantly speaking negative words to you, like, what if, the 2 worst words ever put together in the English language, because that's almost always followed by something negative, which then sets off the fight or flight nervous system, so you can't react well. So what if this happens, or I hope I don't do that, or how did I do this, or I should have done that. People do them to themselves all the time, and it impacts their performance, whether they're a lawyer, a doctor, or an athlete, or a financial professional. It impacts their performance. So I teach people how to recognize that internal critic and that negative voice and what to do about it so they can harness it.
Okay, yeah, and I absolutely agree with you, because a lot of people are stymied from that inner voice because the inner critic is so loud sometimes that we can't, it doesn't seem like we can shut it off. So you help
It's
athletes and
invented,
everybody
it's
help.
invented by us, and our brain will accept what we tell it, even though it may be irrational and untrue. Let me give you a quick example of that. If I was standing in front of you and I said, I want you to close your eyes, Michelle, and I've got a lemon that I'm going to cut in half here, and I want you to imagine that I've handed you half of that lemon, and I want you to take a big juicy bite out of that lemon. If you visualize yourself biting the lemon, you'll start to salivate. Your brain will think there's actually acid coming into your mouth when it really isn't. So we put all kinds of crazy things in our mind, and our brain just goes along with it until we change it. So crazy things are thoughts that don't make any sense, like the pandemic will never end and my life is upset forever. That's an irrational, catastrophic thought that doesn't make sense. But a lot of people may think that way and their brain will go along with it. So it turns on the fight or flight nervous system. When you turn on the fight or flight nervous system, it changes the hormones in your body and tightens up your muscles. So if you're trying to perform a sports act, you can't because your muscles are getting tightened. So it slows you down. If you're trying to give a speech, you're going to start fumbling because your throat muscles are tightening up. If you're trying to do some business with someone, you're going to forget what you wanted to say because your memory gets fouled up when the fight or flight gets turned on. So all of these things happen. And as I describe in a lot of my books and a lot of my presentations, the worst thing that happens when you're constantly turning on the fight or flight nervous system because of these irrational thoughts is it stops the immune system during those times because it's harnessing all the energy to deal with what it thinks is an emergency. And so if 30, 40, 50 times a day, you're worried about traffic, you're impatient, I don't have a good relationship in my life, my work is never going to be the same, I can't go back to work, I'm not going to make enough money. If you're worried about 50, 60 things a day like that, each time it's shutting off your immune system. That's the key to why people get ill and go from doctor to doctor and the blood work looks fine. They can't figure out what's wrong with you, but you have real symptoms. It's all because of the stress that you provide yourself by turning on the fight or flight nervous system, which starts with the internal critic.
Wow. Now that brings up a question that I have is that how long can someone live in that fight or flight system? Can they live their entire lives? Or is there a breaking point where things start to fall apart if you've lived there?
That's a wonderful question, Michelle. There's plenty of research that shows the physiological impact of constantly turning on the fight or flight nervous system. There are cardiovascular issues because every time you turn it on, you're raising your blood pressure, which should be raised if you're facing a lion, but not if you're facing, there's too much of a line at the store, okay? So the cardiovascular issues, you can look at almost any system in the body that will break down. If people are tightening up all the time unconsciously, they get headaches, they get jaw pain, they get neck pain. That comes from tightening muscles. If glucose is squirting into your bloodstream constantly, because it should be there if you need the energy for fight or flight, but if it's happening over every little thing you're upset about during the day, that's where diabetes comes from. So you can look at any major disorder and it has a major component that's related to stress and the fight or flight nervous system. So the answer to your question is no, people don't live as long. They get more diseases, debilitating diseases, chronic diseases, and that's been one of my specialties, is to help people overcome those diseases and recognize the real source of it. In fact, one of the webinars that I produce, webinars now, it used to be in-person keynotes, but now it's a webinar, is called How to Live Much Longer Than Your Kids Hoped You Would. That's the psychology of life extension. And a big part of that is stopping this internal crazy thinking that we all do by habit until we learn about it so we can recognize it.
Yeah, well, absolutely, yes. And I have lived that myself and feeling like constant fight or flight, and you just get used to it and it becomes harder and harder to relax and just detox your brain. I call it a traffic jam. I got a traffic jam in my brain, and you have to step away, and then you feel guilty because you're not working, and you should be working all the time because then you're a slacker. And so it's a cycle that ends up happening. And do you see how people, I guess you help people stop that cycle and take a time out, and then you put positive reprogramming ideas in their
Reprogramming
heads.
I tell them how to reprogram their minds to develop the mindset of a champion. So you just made a statement that shows the kind of example of habitual negative thinking when you said, I should be working.
Mhm.
We call that a should statement, like there's some rule that tells you how much you should be working in order to be a good person or something. So that's just a made up thing. I should be working and I feel guilty that I'm not working. That's just made up. So once people recognize that, I teach them how to change that dialogue.
Okay, and what are the, I know it just encompasses a huge amount of information and tools. Can you name the top 3 tools that you use to help someone start to reprogram?
You are an amazing interviewer because you ask questions that are in depth and they're really important. And I didn't prep you or anything. You came up with these all by yourself. I'm really
These
proud
are
of you, Michelle.
from up here.
You did it. You're really proud. Yes, one thing I do is I teach people a mental toughness skill, and I can email them a free copy of that so that because when I'm doing it on a webinar, they can't take notes. I'm speaking so fast. Mental toughness, a skill to stop that negative, unfortunate thinking at any time and to transform it and to change it and the steps that they take within it to change it. Another thing I do is I teach people warp speed techniques to change thoughts immediately. And I give them a template that they can actually start writing things into, and eventually they'll know it. They won't have to write into it. Whenever they have a negative emotion, it could be anger, it could be frustration, impatience, irritation, worry, fear, anxiety, stress, you name it. As soon as they get that emotion, I teach them how to write it down and then go through a series of steps of what they can do. Step number 1 is, what were the thoughts that went through your mind right before you recognized you were feeling this way? Once people recognize the thinking, that's where we can really get some headway with them and teach them how to change those habitual thinking habits right away, which will make a dramatic difference in the emotion that they were feeling. It melts away.
Yeah, and for sure. And can you tell, with all your years of experience, can you tell when someone says, yes, I'm going to do everything you say, and yet you can tell that they're not doing their homework, they're not doing it, and they're coming back to you and saying, yes, I am, yes, I am?
Oh, of course I can tell that because if I'm doing personal coaching with people, I make them accountable. So I give them a homework assignment, and then we start talking about the homework assignment the next time. And if they didn't do it, they don't go to detention like in high school. If they didn't do it, I want to find out, where's the resistance? Let's talk about why you resist doing this. Let's talk about procrastination. Why are you putting these things off? There's a psychology behind all of that, and this is just a bad habit that we can change. So I don't put people down for not doing the homework, but I want to examine why they didn't do the homework and what that negative critical voice inside them said when they thought about doing the homework.
Yes, and have you found that there is just as much fear of success as there is a failure? Because I can imagine that fear is part of one of those hindrances. And, but people think, oh no, I'm fearful of failure, but they're really fearful of success. How does that manifest differently?
See, nobody asked me the A questions like you just asked. I've never been asked that question in 40 years of doing interviews, Michelle. And I can give you a great example of a case I had once where that was precisely what was keeping the person from moving forward. Actually, 2 cases. One case was somebody who told me that I said, could you possibly be afraid of succeeding? And he said, that's an odd question. And I said, just think about it for a minute. And then he told me that he grew up in a very poor household where nobody had any money, and he had a lot of siblings. And as he was thinking, when I asked him the question, he said, it would embarrass me to make too much money when my siblings would see that, so I may be resisting that in some way. So that's an interesting case. Another one I had was with a professional female golfer who couldn't understand why she couldn't make the cut. She always missed by 1 stroke, and she had been doing very well. She was on the tour for 14 years, but suddenly was not making the cut. And I asked her the same question. Is there a reason you wouldn't want to make the cut and get into the money? And she chastised me for asking an ignorant question, but then I said, just think about it for a few minutes. She thought, and then there was a wry smile that came over her face, Michelle. And she said, I never thought about this before. I said, what is it? She said, you know, a few months ago, I had my brother take over as my money manager, and I think he's been stealing money from me, and I'm afraid to confront him. And maybe I'm psychologically not wanting to win any money because then I have to deal with him again. So isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting, yes. And I know that you deal with so many athletes, but are the similarities between athletes and financial people, business people, is there a common thread that goes through all of them, regardless of their profession?
Yeah, without question. You know, I wrote 2 big books for certain professionals. One was the Teacher's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. One is the Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. I could have written the Lawyer's Stress Mastery Guide, the Doctor's Stress Mastery Guide. It's all the same dynamics of what causes the stress. Doesn't matter what your occupation is. And with athletes, it's the same way. You mentioned in the bio that I work with 3 Olympic gold medal winners. Well, what separates an Olympic gold medal winner from an Olympic silver winner, for example? They have the same talent, they have the same experience, they have the same great coaching, they have the same physical ability. What separates them? It's all the mindset. And that's what separates a better lawyer from a lawyer who's okay, a better financial advisor from one who's okay. Any career field, you name it, the difference is the mindset, and that's what I teach.
Okay, that is great. And I've taken a course in the past about imposter syndrome, and that is very prevalent. I know men struggle with it as well, but it's real prevalent among women, and especially CEO women and very successful women. They're afraid that somebody's going to find out that they're not as bright and brilliant as everybody thinks they are. And how do you manage that? How do you kind of coach them out of that when someone is so entrenched in thinking someone's going to find them out, and they really are brilliant, they really are successful, but they don't believe it?
Yeah, that comes up early in all of my books because it's such a common fear. I like to use a poker analogy. It's like everybody around me thinks I'm a royal flush, but inside I think I'm a pair of 6s. You know, so and it's only a matter of time before they figure it out, and boy, am I going to be embarrassed. Mm-hmm. This comes from lack of self-confidence and lack of self-esteem, which frequently starts in childhood and adolescence. It comes from comments that you may have heard from parents when you were growing up, even well-intended parents who think they're helping you. Like, I remember, you know, my father, when I said I wanted to try out for football, he said, "You sure you really want to do that? You're not really much of an athlete, and I don't want you to be embarrassed." So he thought it was helping me, but what did that tell me, and what did that plant inside my head? So those are the kinds of things that happen inadvertently as we're growing up, and pretty soon we develop a lack of confidence. We're afraid to try something new. We don't want to risk things because we're afraid of failure, or in your case, as you mentioned, maybe of success. So I get at that very early because we want to uncover some of those belief patterns. I call them iceberg core beliefs because they're like icebergs. Only a little of it is above the surface where we're consciously aware of it. Most of it is we're unconscious. Beliefs like don't make waves, don't have confrontations, whatever you do, stay under the radar, or if I'm not perfect, I'm probably going to be a failure, so I have to struggle for perfection. Or I can't change the way I am, it's in my DNA, so why even try? I mean, these are some of the iceberg core beliefs that a lot of people walk around with and not realize it, and that drives that imposter fear as well as all the other fears they have.
It does, because I've read Dr. Valerie Young's book, you know, on the imposter syndrome, and I think she wrote it years ago, but she just zeroed in on especially women that struggle with that. They're just like, oh, you think, you know, like, and we also think that if I can do this, anybody can do this. You know, that's a real common thread. So Like, no, nobody can do it, even though other people are writing, making ice cream, whatever they're doing. They can't do it like you do it specifically and put your personality, your flair into it.
Yeah, the other way to look at this, Michelle, is that um, people who are successful, who in their heart of hearts don't believe they deserve it, think they were lucky. They were in the right place at the right time. It was just a coincidence that they happen to be doing well, and they can't continue to do that. Versus people with a better sense of self-esteem believe that it's because of my work ethic, it's because of the grinding that I've done over the years to learn what I need to learn to be good at this job or in this position, that I'm successful. And even if I have an obstacle I run into every so often, I will overcome that obstacle, learn from it, and move on to the next opportunity. So that's the difference between people who have the imposter fear and those who will never have it because they have the right mindset.
Yeah, for sure. And how long does it typically take you during a coaching, not session, but a coaching experience, or a coaching length? I don't know what to call it, but when you coach, does it take months? Could it take weeks?
How many sessions does it take, Well,
Yeah.
everybody's different because they all come with a different agenda. They all come with a different history, and it matters how fast I can unravel that history and find out what their patterns are. But usually once I understand where their thinking habits are, I can teach them very quickly how to change them and use that template that I was talking to you about, so that then they can do this on their own and maybe just have a refresher every so often with me. My goal with anyone I'm coaching is to give them the skills that they can use themselves right away, so that they don't have to feel like they're locked into, months and months of coaching with me. Although I do have some people, I've had someone just the other day say, if I wanted to stay with you for a year, how much would that cost? Is there a break if I want to stay with you for a year? So I said, well, why are you deciding you want to stay with me for a year? And they said, because if I really like what you're doing for me, I want to have you in my back pocket where I can call you up whenever I want. So some people like, long-term coaching.
Okay, and that makes sense too. Yeah, and all depends how diligent they are in doing the homework and really wanting to make some changes. Because some people, I think, go into coaching and they say, well, we'll just see how this works. You have to be intentional, don't you? And don't you find that's the best,
absolutely,
coaching client?
Yeah, and women are much more amenable to this than men. Men are hung up with all kinds of things. It's a sign of weakness if I need help. I can't even get a mentor because then it looks like I can't do it myself. And, in my private practice over the years, my clinical practice, husbands would be sort of dragged in by their spouses. They almost never came in on their own unless their wife threatened a divorce or something. Then they rushed in. What can I do?
Yes. And my cell phone is going off and I usually mute it. So I'll be right back. This is the glory of being live. Hold on. Okay, this is the first time this has ever happened. So
well,
you are the lucky one.
Turn mine off. You reminded me to turn mine off, so I just.
I usually do right in the middle of, right before I start, but now it's on mute. I'm so sorry, but hey, that makes us human.
I didn't hear it, so I don't know if your listeners will hear it or not.
Well, it's the Monday Night Football theme.
Okay,
so.
Yeah, okay, I get that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in coaching, interested in breaking through obstacles, if they want to go to the next level in their career or their life, relationships? How can they get a hold of you? Because I imagine a lot will want to.
Very easily. And by the way, I'm doing a complimentary webinar for certain groups of people, for certain companies now during COVID, called Your Proven Blueprint for Building Resilience and Thriving During Challenging Times. So if they want any information on this, they can reach out. I'm going to give you a phone number first. My number is 949-510-5660, and just leave a message with my voicemail. It's all confidential. or they can get a hold of me on email at drjack@advisingtheadvisors, O-R-S, advisingtheadvisors.com. A website
Wonderful.
also, if they want to read more about what I do and can do for them or their company, it's www.drjacksinger.com.
That is wonderful. I'm sure you will get a lot of hits on that one because people are trying to cope nowadays. They're trying to, it's pushed even, you know, I'm used to being alone all the time. And this has pushed, you know, that even beyond boundaries that like, I'm okay being alone a lot, but this is a lot, you know, too much of a good thing, I guess you could say. So I think people will really reach out to you to especially for the webinar. And
Okay.
I hope they'll reach out for coaching too. So
I'll give them a free coaching session if they call me, just so they can tell me what's going on. I can tell them, you know, what to do. And then if they want more, that's up to them.
that is fabulous, fabulous. So yeah, and I met Dr. Jack at another We Are Connect Ed networking group. And I saw him on the screen a couple of times, and I saw Sport Psychologist. So I thought, oh, we have to get together, but I never, you know, took the initiative. Thankfully, he did via LinkedIn, I think it was, or email.
I think it was probably email after I heard you tell what you do. I was fascinated by the work that you do and such a wonderful author and ghostwriter for athletes and other groups of people. So I was fascinated by that. So I think I reached out for that reason. If you hadn't spoken, I wouldn't have known about you. So it always pays to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the glory of connection, you know, especially during this time, is just, you know, put yourself out there. You have nothing, absolutely nothing to lose.
Right.
Yeah. So I just want to tell people how they can get in touch with Winning Proof. And you can get in touch with me via my website at winningproof.com, or you can email me at winningproof@gmail.com. Or if you want to call me, you can do that too at 714-797-3731. It's 714-797-3731. And my contact information is also on my website, and I'm on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, especially Instagram. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Jack, for your time today. Thank you for taking your time to just have a good conversation about how people can improve their lives.
And thank you for being the best interviewer I've had in a long time. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Well, I appreciate that too. And I just want to tell everybody, thank you so much for listening, continuing to listen. You can also, I keep forgetting to say YouTube. All my episodes are on YouTube. Give me a day or so to get it up there, but you can get all my episodes on YouTube, subscribe, and you'll get them all. So thank you, everyone. Until next time. For another, you'll tune in for another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.